Hi, Catherine here from Yoga Naraska. We have been talking about PMDD over the last little while, and I thought today that I would discuss the three main ways that PMDD impacts your life and how it's impacted my life, plus one factor that I feel gets often unconsidered. So we'll talk about that at the end, so stay tuned. So if you don't know what PMDD is, please check out some previous episodes, which will explain it a little bit more. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it is a chronic and cyclical hormone-based mood disorder. So it's basically a extreme sensitivity to the normal changes in hormones that happen throughout the menstrual cycle. There are constant and repetitive cycles of depression, anxiety, overwhelm, and pain. And considering that the average menstruator will have about 450 periods throughout their lifetime, this is a long-term chronic illness. The main criteria that separate premenstrual syndrome, or PMS, from premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, is the degree to which it creates difficulties or dysfunction in your everyday life. And there are three main categories. So there's the first one, which is home, your home life. The second one is work or school, and the third is the rest of your relationships with friends and extended family. So let's talk about home life. PMDD can make your home life very, very difficult. Your home is supposed to be a place where you feel most comfortable to just relax and let yourself be yourself. But when you have PMDD, sometimes home can feel like the only place where you're able to let your emotions out. And often those emotions are very big and out of control. Often the people that you live with feel like you are taking your emotions out on them, you're lashing out at them, and that you're picking fights on purpose. You and your family might not understand why you're becoming moody and upset so often, which creates the situation that is ripe for fights and arguments and misunderstandings. In fact, a recent survey found that 97% of PMDD sufferers found that their family relationships were negatively impacted by having PMDD. And of course, this can be really hard to deal with when you don't even know that you have PMDD. Most sufferers have no idea that this is what they're dealing with, and obviously their family members don't have any idea either. So it just feels like the same issues are coming up over and over and over again, and there's always these fights, and then making up, and then fights, and then making up, and it's just this constant, overwhelming, uncomfortable situation in the home. Personally, my relationship with my parents and my sister were really fraught in my teenage years and my early 20s before I knew what I was dealing with. They thought that I was just sort of a typical angsty teenager, whereas I was actually really suffering with some mental health conditions, including PMDD, depression, and anxiety. And I wasn't really getting the help and the support that I needed because no one knew what I was dealing with. I would find that I would build up all of this energy throughout the day at work or at school, and by the time I got home, I just didn't have any energy to hide it any longer, and that would be the only safe place for my emotions to come out. Many people with PMDD feel as though the people around them don't understand what they're going through or their experience, but they don't have an explanation for the way that they're feeling. The more you can learn about PMDD and educate those around you, the better you'll both be able to cope with what's going on and be able to have some common ground to talk about it. My relationships with my extended family have also really suffered because, again, most people didn't understand what I was going through, and it's not really a normal topic at the Thanksgiving dinner table to be talking about how your periods are making you feel crazy. So it can be hard, especially when there's so many family events such as birthdays, holidays, weddings, anniversaries, vacations, anything like that. It can be hard to work up the mental and physical energy to show up. And sometimes when you show up, you're really not feeling at your best, and you come across as if you don't want to be there, and you're cold and angry. And it just makes you sort of feel crappy about yourself. And a lot of the time, you just don't show up at all, which sort of makes you feel like the black sheep of the family, which can be really frustrating. You might also be watching your siblings and your cousins sort of surpassing you with life milestones because you have this debilitating disorder that you're dealing with, but you tend to blame yourself for just not being good enough. The other area that can be impacted is your relationship with your partner. 98% of people with PMDD found that it put a really big strain on their relationship with their intimate partner. Although we're in a really great spot now, it's taken a lot of education and communication with my partner to be able to talk about my PMDD. And I spent a lot of time worrying that he might leave me due to my repeated bouts of depression and anxiety. Personally, my libido has often suffered because of either PMDD or the medications that I've been on, which has also put a strain on our relationship. Personally, because PMDD has affected me so deeply, I am not sure if I want to have children. Although the research is still out on this, it is possible that having PMDD could be a factor in developing postpartum depression. And this is something that is a big risk personally for me, and I'm not sure if I want to have children, which also affects my relationship with my partner and my family. It's possible that PMDD might be the main factor in deciding if I want to have kids or not. That being said, many PMDD warriors do have children, and I'm sure they're great parents. But I understand that the constant cycles of ups and downs can mean there are times when you're not feeling as patient, your temper might flare, and it can be hard to meet all of the expectations that parents put on themselves and other parents. It can also really be hard to make the time for self-care that's necessary when struggling with PMDD when you're so busy caring for others. But for all the PMDD parents out there, I just want to remind you that it's okay to let your kids see you struggle sometimes. And it's definitely important for them to see you taking steps to manage your mental health. So taking breaks, taking time for self-care, and explaining to them that it's okay to struggle sometimes and that there are ways that you can deal with your struggles. It's also okay for you to ask for help at certain times of the month from your partner, your family, a babysitter. If you need the time to manage your mental health, then it is more than okay to do that. The final way that PMDD has impacted me at home is my ability to keep the house organized and clean. The constant overwhelm and ups and downs make it really hard to stick to a routine of any sort, never mind a cleaning schedule, including doing the laundry, doing the dishes, cleaning the bathrooms, keeping everything organized, decluttering. It can just really be overwhelming and the thing that puts you over the top. As a result, I tend to clean on a monthly schedule versus a weekly schedule because that is the time that I have the energy for all of the tasks that are necessary to keep a house maintained and clean. And although it might not be up to the standards of others, it's ultimately what I need to do to be able to manage my own life. As a result, I tend to feel really self-aware and embarrassed when I invite other people over and it might not be up to their standards. It also makes me feel really crappy when I go to other people's houses and their houses are more well-maintained than mine, and it can really impact my self-esteem. Ultimately, what it comes down to is adjusting your expectations of yourself, and as long as your home is comfortable and safe for you to be in, then that is okay. If you don't want to invite other people over, that's okay. You can just enforce your boundaries and suggest an alternate meeting place. It's time to let go of the guilt. Okay, the next area of life that PMDD can impact is your school and work life. I think this impact is severely underestimated. It can really affect the course of your life. And although it would be nice to be able to tailor your life around your menstrual cycle, it's just not possible in an organizational or institutional setting. There are always going to be meetings, deadlines, or networking events that seem to crop up right when you're feeling at your worst. Our school and work systems seem to be designed around a male worldview where a static level of ability and productivity is expected at all times. And those who menstruate, especially those with PMDD, just aren't able to live up to those expectations. We're going to have times where we are more productive and times when we are less productive. And although the amount of work probably evens out in the end, sometimes it can look like you are slacking off, even though there are other times when you are going above and beyond, even leading to burnout. There have been times where I've been passed over for promotion because although I might be getting more work done in total, it looks at times like I'm not being as productive as, say, one of my male coworkers. No matter where I worked, I would have difficulties due to my PMDD. In customer service jobs, there would be times of the month where I'd be feeling really grumpy and it'd be difficult for me to interact with customers and to have a happy smile on my face. In labor-based jobs, there would inevitably be days where I'd be very fatigued and in pain, and I'd be expected to do the same amount of work as every other day. And in corporate jobs, I'd be expected to be productive all of the time, where, as I just mentioned, it's just not always possible. Absenteeism is also a big problem. Sometimes there's days where you just can't get out of bed and you would rather work from home, but obviously not all jobs are able to accommodate this. And it's really hard to ask for accommodations in a job where you might have a male supervisor and you can't go up to them and say, look, my period's really bad, I need to go home, or I need to work from home this week out of every month. It's just not something that's built into our work system. And the same thing goes for school. You're going to have to make deadlines and do class presentations and go to school sporting events on days where you just feel like crap. And it's really hard to be able to give an explanation for that when menstruation and mental health are huge taboos in our society. Personally, I would end up working so hard on the times where I was feeling good that I would end up burning out and I'd have to leave jobs because I would just be so exhausted that I just couldn't go on. I would end up hopping through seasonal jobs, or I would end up getting fired from some jobs because I just couldn't keep up. And although I had dreams of starting my own business, my lack of self-esteem from all of these experiences really got to me, and the constant cycles of depression and anxiety would make it really difficult to succeed and to be consistent. I've definitely experienced periods of unemployment, which in turn really impacts my ability to be able to care for myself properly. Sometimes you're spending thousands of dollars on doctors and treatments and therapists and medications, and your income is one of the primary factors in how effective your treatment can be and what treatment that you can access. So it's sort of a vicious cycle. Your income can impact the treatments that you have access to, but the lack of treatment can also impact the income that you're able to make. It's really a vicious cycle that I think is really underestimated, and PMDD can have an impact on the whole arc of your career throughout your lifetime. So let's move on to your social life. So I talked a little bit about extended family, and the same kind of thing goes for your friendships. You can seem a bit like a flaky friend because sometimes when you're feeling good, you'll make plans for 2 weeks out, and by the time that time comes around, you're feeling anxious and depressed and you don't really want to go out. So it makes you seem kind of like an unreliable, flaky friend. And eventually, after this happens often enough, sometimes your friends stop bothering to invite you because you've turned down so many invitations. It can also make it really difficult for you to remember birthdays, to pick up gifts, to send birthday cards and thank you cards, and it makes you seem kind of ungrateful. The flip side of this, though, is that because you've gone through so many things, you tend to be quite empathetic and a good listener, and you might become the person that your friends turn to when they're struggling with their own problems. Social events can also be a big problem. So I've often had to go to events where I'm expected to be my most happiest when I'm actually feeling my worst. Weddings, holidays, vacations, family events, nights out, pretty much anything, you name it. I've had to show up when I'm feeling at my absolute worst. And although you really genuinely want to be happy, you just don't have it in you, and it can be such a disappointing feeling. In fact, I dealt with PMDD at my own wedding because I wanted to not be grumpy or on my period on my honeymoon. So I was pretty much anxious and depressed at my own wedding, but sometimes you need to make these sort of sacrifices so that you can enjoy yourself. And something that's really not talked about is just how hard it is to put on that happy face and be happy for others when you're really struggling inside. It can feel like such a horrible dissonance between how you're feeling inside and the person that you're projecting to the outside world. And sometimes you just don't have the energy for it, and you end up not showing up at all. Main criteria, we talked about home, we talked about school and work, and we talked about social life. But I think PMDD really impacts our self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves. So this constant sort of dissonance between expectation and reality with how we are expected to behave and how we are behaving or feeling could really cause us to feel like a failure a lot of the time. We feel like we're letting down our family and our partners. We're feeling like we're letting down our potential at school or our bosses or our team at work. And we feel like we're letting our friends down a lot of the time. And that just tends to make us feel really, really bad about ourselves. The fact that there's such a stigma about menstruation and mental health makes it really hard for us to communicate what we're dealing with because we feel like people might not understand what we're going through or they might judge us. After all, so many menstruators just live with their periods, and so many people before us have just managed, and we're finding it so difficult, and it can seem like maybe there's just something wrong with you, not in a medical sense, but like you're just not a strong person or not a good person. And the unpredictability of it all can just make you feel like you can't trust yourself, and you just begin to see yourself as a failure and a bad person, even though that might not be true. It's also hard to keep a healthy lifestyle when you have PMDD because you're having these constant up and downs. You have no self-esteem and you don't trust yourself to be able to continue on with something like a healthy diet or exercise or even medication. So the good news here is that it is actually possible to build your life around your menstrual cycle, especially while you're trying to find treatment. But the thing we need to do is to let go of the expectations that we have of ourselves. Sure, other people might judge you for what you're doing, but as long as you're doing it in your best interest for your mental, physical, and emotional health, then I believe that you're making the right choice. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking about each phase of the menstrual cycle and how you can better tailor your life to your needs in each of these phases. I'll be talking a little bit more about what's happening in a scientific sense and to your symptoms in each phase. And I'll actually have a yoga class that's specifically made for each phase of the cycle to help support you in your PMDD journey. So stay tuned for more information. If you'd like access to those classes, please sign up for my Yoga for the PMDD Cycle newsletter. The link is below. There's also a Facebook group there, and hopefully I'll be doing some live classes there in the near future. So please do check that out if you are a PMDD warrior. So please let me know in the comments if this sounds like you. Let me know how PMDD has impacted your life, whether it's similar or different, or if there's any ways that I haven't considered here in this video. I would love to hear from you and connect with you as well. That's all for me today, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in.